Good morning, everyone. Morning. Thanks to the NCSE for inviting us to speak again this year. It's always a good sign, isn't it, when you get a repeat gig? So thank you very much for that. And thank you also to Professor Lani Florian for an inspiring talk. Lani has been an important part of my research and scholarship journey, and she has been an inspiration to so many scholars of inclusion and innovators in inclusion in the field. So it's a great honour to be presenting with her this morning. So I'm here, of course, with my wonderful colleague Lisha to report the findings of our investigation into the impact of NCSE's frontline services from the perspectives of its intended beneficiaries. So, of course, we're talking there about parent carers, families, school communities and students themselves, students like Willow, who's here with us today, who I had the pleasure of meeting a couple of weeks ago. Now, just in case there are some people here who cannot see very clearly, I'll make an attempt to describe what I look like. Since she's already been mentioned, I'll tell you that I look nothing like Beyoncé. In fact, I'm the opposite to Beyoncé in so many indescribable ways. I'm more on the Gloria Hunniford, Queen Camilla end of the continuum. I'm quite small, I've got blondish hair, and I'm of a kind of sage stage in my life, and I'm here with my younger, taller, more svelte colleague, Lisha Sullivan, who also has that auburn hair and is absolutely gorgeous. So if you can imagine that, you'll be there. Okay, so the research team that completed this study included 3 organisations: the University of Derby, where I'm still affiliated, but I moved to the University of Strathclyde shortly, Mary Immaculate College, and a company called IFF Research. But most importantly, we engaged a group of practitioners, expert practitioners in inclusion, a group of teacher researchers to be co-researchers with us. And we just want to say that one of our teacher researchers, Sarah Gallagher, is watching online and has recently graduated with her doctorate, which focused on mainstream schools and the role of the SENCO. So congratulations, Sarah. Just want to big up the team there. Okay, so what we'd like to do today is tell you something about the context in which this research project was commissioned. And it's important for me to say that at the time it was commissioned, it was a brave move by the NCSE to turn to the public for their perception. And I'll explain that a little more in a moment. We'll also talk to you about our methodological design. We want you to know that it was broad and rigorous. And we also will share something of the research questions that were posed for us to investigate. We're going to talk about what happened when we reduced our data thematically and what we found in relation to the 4 questions which focused on impact from the perspective of beneficiaries, what happened and what we learned about relationships and communication, what we learned about what was working well and what could improve. And remember, this is from the perception of beneficiaries themselves. And finally, the policy and practice landscape. All of this was happening within. And finally, we'd like to consider some implications in a reflective segment for this morning's presentation. So let's start with the context for the Commission, something that Fergal has already alluded to today. So we know at the time of research that demands for specialist services and support were rising dramatically. So you can see there rises, 5- and 6-fold increases in the numbers of special classes, an increase in specialist additional staff, an increase in diagnoses of autism and autism classes. But at the same time, as Fergal has mentioned, staffing had been stable for the NCSE for some time, but recently a €13 million increase in funding has led to expansion. And the NCSE, as you'll hear later from John, are involved in a strategic programme of workforce expansion and development that this study will inform. For example, there's been a doubling of CNO posts, and all of this is happening in the context of the NCSE strategy Vision 26. I mention this because at the time of our study, we could sense in our participants' accounts their experience of scarcity. And as you'll see later, scarcity had an impact on their perception. So I'm just going to hand over to my colleague, Lisha, shortly. Before I do that, and we'll talk about methodology shortly. Not yet, Lisha, stay there. So the NCSE frontline services that we researched included all of those that beneficiaries will have most direct experience of. So we asked our participants about their perceptions of special educational needs organisers, who of course are those people on the ground working in regional teams to advise schools and parents and carers. We asked them about special education teachers and special needs assistants allocations and the NCSE's role in that. We asked them about applications and allocations for transport, equipment, and so on. We talked about the visiting teacher services, the NCSE and school advisory service, and also teacher professional learning, as well as the website and the guides that the organisation produces. Important for us to say, we were not commissioned to compare these services or to say which ones were the best or the worst. That would be difficult given the different remit and resource base of these services. Our interest was in what do beneficiaries feel about these services as a continuum of support and the difference they make. So thinking about methodological design, you'll see that our study involved 4 methods. One was a contextual review, one was an online survey, garnering 1,329 responses, 771 from parents, carers, and over 500 from school staff. We also did in-depth interviews with parent carers and school staff, as well as frontline service deliverers. And we also, and we want to celebrate this, did some case studies of schools, 9 schools, and most importantly, 9 students in their schools, because we wanted to hear their stories. So I'm just going to pass over to my colleague, Lisha, momentarily, who will tell you more about that particular element of the research.
Thanks, Debs, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here to speak to the case study element of the evaluation on behalf of my colleague, Professor Emer Ring, who I know is watching in online, and as Deb said, Dr. Sarah Gallagher, and also Siobhan Colclaw, Rory Kiff, Austin Newman, Emma O'Sullivan, and Davina Walsh are fantastic teacher researchers. And we also owe a debt of gratitude to Dr. Jo Fitzgerald for all of her support in helping us recruit such a fantastic bunch of teacher researchers. We were so fortunate. These teachers had immense experience and expertise in the area of special education. This meant they were really uniquely attuned to the acoustic of practice and gave them great credibility out in field work sites, both with school staff and also with the children and young people with whom they were engaging in field work. The case studies also engaged parents and carers. And I suppose the aim of that really aligned with Ron Brenner's bioecological framework was to really try to capture children and young people's lives and context in their school. So again, we were quite flexible with this, but across all the 9 sites, our teacher researchers engaged with children's parents, they engaged with SNAs, special educational teachers, CAS teachers, and of course, principals. When it came to working with children and young people, as a research team, we were very keen to, I suppose, employ a method that, the children could use modes of communicating experience, modes of representing experience, and modes of communicating or recording experience that they were familiar with. So we went with ethnographic mapping to do this. So every child who participated created a map where they were able to use drawing, they were able to use visuals, they were able to use movement, and in conversations with the teacher researchers, they were obviously also able to use talk. And some of our children and young people went on an optional walking tour around their classroom and around their school with the teacher researcher to point out important people and places and things on their map. Teacher researchers also collected relevant artifacts out in school. So again, artifacts were broad. It could be something on a display, it could be a resource, it could be an image of a building modification. So all that data then came together to create 2 case studies, a child and young person case study and a school case study. And we've previously used a similar method in the end of Year 3 evaluation of the access and inclusion model. And Debs has recently published an article which talks a little bit more about the effectiveness of that method. So I'm going to hand back for now.
Thank you, Lisa. So I hope we've reassured you about the depth, breadth and rigour of our study. So now we'll start talking about what we found in relation to the 4 questions set for us, which were: what was the impact of the services provided by the NCSE from the perception of key beneficiaries? What perception did people have about communication, relationships and collaboration in that context? What's the policy and practice landscape? And finally, what can we say about what's working well and what improvements could be made? So for those of you who don't see very well, this slide is very visually arranged, so you can see, or maybe you can't, that there are 4 themes represented. These represent the findings of our study. I'll explain those and a little bit more. So the first theme is about the impact perceived by stakeholders, and that has 2 sub-themes. One of them is about descriptions of impact. What did our participants tell us about impact? The second is a phenomenon of interest, which we've called process schema dominant over impact schema. The second chart summarises theme 2 and its 3 sub-themes. These sub-themes contain data where participants are talking to us about the crucial role of the CNO and also about how relations and communication mediates their experience of impact of these services. The third chart is about our participants' view about the match between the support and need. And there are 3 sub-themes, and one of those is bureaucracy as a mediator of sentiment and perceptions of insufficiency. And finally, theme 4 was about collaboration and misunderstanding, and this contains data which illustrates participants' yearning for a more mutually respectful and collaborative space for inclusion. So, moving on to findings, we're going to start off with participants' views of impact. So overall, we found that a small majority of parents, carers perceived the support they received from CNOs to be beneficial for their children. In relation to services, we found that participants were describing, parents, carers were describing positive impacts. These were varied across services, but you can see that these perceptions, these ratings are relatively larger, and you can see that a majority of people were talking about the benefits of these services for children's access to education, social benefits and inclusion, improved well-being, and educational progress. I'd like to read an example from our data. Here is a parent saying, Our child is in mainstream school learning with his peers, learning to socialise, make friends and be included, and he's thriving. His speech is better. Another parent saying, it's great to see my child grow and learn and be in line with his peers. The look of pure joy on his face when he achieves something in school to the level of his peers. Clearly, these are the impacts that in an inclusive system that's world class, we want to hear about. Here's another example of a parent talking about her child who's attending a special class in a mainstream school that she feels is the right balance. So she says, they're physically in a big room and it's a small class. All the autism classes have 6 students maximum. So it's a small class, so she hasn't gone into the mainstream class for lessons at all. She joined them outdoors and for play, and she joins the mainstream for school tours and any events like that. She did the Christmas concert and she was up on stage with all the class. Now, I think it's important for me to pause for a moment, because as Lisa said, we also completed a study on the access and inclusion model, which is the policy which focuses on the inclusion of learners with disabilities in preschool. And we saw a similar theme there. Parents really welcome their children having a place in their local community schools. And what really matters to them is that their child belongs and they can see signs that their child belongs. And for this parent, the balance of special class and social inclusion was the right balance in that sense. Now, we're going to talk now about what school staff felt. What school staff perceived to be the impact of interacting with the NCSE's frontline services. And there may be a surprise in this for you when you compare it to what parents' carers told us. School staff had a more limited view of the impact of the NCSE's frontline services compared to parent carers. Only a minority of school staff had perceived benefits to their capacities for being more inclusive in their schools. And a majority actually said that there were no or even detrimental impacts for their schools and for children in their schools. Now, this is an interesting finding, but we've tried to offer some explanations for why this might be. We think that this may be one of the explanations. So, when we were talking to school staff and NCSE school staff as well, we found that they mainly wanted to talk to us about their experiences of process, the application they made, the phone call they made, the negative interaction they had in that communication, rather than impact. What was the impact of a resource they gained or an interaction they had on children in their schools and on their staff? Now, we're not sure as for sure why this is, but we've got some possible explanations. So we think that one of the explanations is as follows. Schematically, we think that school staff may be associating the getting of the resource as the impact they were after. Once the resource is in place, obviously impact on inclusion follows, because if we didn't need it for that, we wouldn't be asking for it. There's a logic in that, and we are not being critical of school staff. We're just trying to outline something that may be useful to an education system that wants to be world class. We also think that participants were, at the time of scarcity, reiterating stories that had a great deal of emotional resonance for them. So, for example, they had been frustrated. Their energy had been sapped by bureaucracy. It was all time-consuming. They felt isolated. The system was designed to put you off. They felt gaslit. So at a time of scarcity, they were telling us the experience that they felt emotionally connected with. It's a phenomenon of interest, isn't it? because what's happening is line of sight on impact is being masked by an experience of process. And the NCSE, and John will talk later about a strategy that is directly addressing these process obstacles. Here's an example from a leader telling us that there are just too many obstacles for making applications, and she says, I don't apply for resources much anymore as the application process is too stressful. However, something different came through in the case studies when we talked to students themselves about their experiences. So I shall hand that back to my colleague Lisa.
Thank you, Debs. So obviously we didn't ask participating children and young people directly about their opinions of frontline services, but we were aiming to get a sense of how they were experiencing school and how their education was being supported. And I think actually similar to previous NCSE commissioned evaluations, such as the evaluation of provision for autistic students and the evaluation of the in-school and preschool therapy demonstration project, a number of common themes emerged, and one was peers, the importance of friends, learning with my classmates, being able to chat with them about what I'm learning, and of course being able to engage and play with them outside at lunchtime. The learning environment was important, so references to the classroom environment, resource rooms, halls, libraries, the playground, and of course, for some children, the broader learning environment beyond the school itself and out into the community. Resources were important: games, visual media, digital technology. And in one case study, we had a very important class teddy. We also got a real sense of participating children and young people as being engaged learners and being motivated learners. They spoke to our teacher researchers about learning to become readers and writers, learning about real exciting concepts such as time, fractions and decimals, developing independent living skills, learning how to cook, learning how to grow vegetables, learning in the areas of music and visual art, becoming a digital learner, and learning how to become self-regulated, managing emotions and managing behaviour, and becoming an independent learner, taking more responsibility for things like feeding the school goldfish. We also found, of course, that staff were really, really important, particularly SNEs, and children articulated this really, really well. One young person who was just about to finish school at the time of data collection had been attending their special school since they were 5 years old and preparing to transition to a new setting. And they commented that while it will be a bit strange for the first week, walking in, and I don't know a thing, but there will be someone there. I know that for sure. I think this captures really beautifully, how those personalised and sustained relationships that this student experienced instilled them with that confidence that they know that as they transition and move on to a new setting, that similar support and those relationships will be there for them. I think Lani referred to it really well when you said that collaboration is at the heart of inclusion, and I think that really resonates with our findings as well. And we have an example on the next slide, which kind of illustrates that really. So this beautiful map was drawn by a 14-year-old student attending a mainstream post-primary school. They were assessed with a mild general learning difficulty and a diagnosis of dyslexia. They're engaging with a level 2 learning programme. It's the first time the school have provided a level 2 learning programme, and it was initiated in response to this young person's needs. They are supported in school by an SEN coordinator, a level 2 learning programme coordinator. Of course, there are mainstream class teachers and SNAs. SNAs are particularly important, and the SNA is captured on the map here. So at number 1 is all about coming in the morning and getting organised for the day. So for this young person, that's important. They suffer from anxiety, and having that support to figure out the timetable, know where you're going and when is really important. And then we have number 3 is taking a movement break with my SNA. So again, the SNA featured very strongly in the map and the conversations with this child and young person. This young person spoke about really enjoying that kind of move to post-primary education, experiencing less withdrawal than they did in primary school. They attend all mainstream classes except Gaeilge, for which they have an exemption. They receive support in literacy. Their favourite subjects are CSPE and SPHE. They like practical elements of subjects, and again, like having opportunities to talk in a peer group about what they're learning. Friends, again, are really important to this young person. As you can see in number 2, that's in class with my friends, and up at my left, possibly your right, is my favourite time, is going outside with my friends at lunchtime. They have a close group of friends, but specifically mention one friend who they eat lunch and play with every day. They enjoy extracurricular activities that they can engage in at school. At the time of data collection, the school show was coming up and they were participating in that. They are using digital technology to access the curriculum, and digital technology is also being used to liaise with parents so they can better support with homework. The parent who was interviewed as part of this case study was very satisfied with the education experience their child was having. They felt really confident that the CNO and school staff together would put in place any resources that were needed for their child. And overall, the school were incredibly positive about the impact of the CNO and the advisory service, and allowing them to establish a special education team, to cascade that learning throughout the school, and of course to implement that important continuum of support. So that's just a snapshot, and I know you'll enjoy reading further case studies and the evaluation itself. Thanks, Deb.
Thank you, Lisa. And there we have, in that case, an example of what Lani said, that good practice is in our own backyard. And these outcomes were the consequence of an interaction and collaboration between NCSE frontline services and that school community. Okay, so moving on, we're going to talk about relationships, collaboration, and communication. So first thing we found in this area is how important the CNO was. The CNO is considered as the face of the NCSE, and interactions with CNOs and the capacity, relational ability, knowledge and agency of the CNO has a significant impact, a relationship with how people perceive the NCSE more generally. Many school staff were talking about scarcity again. The NCSE CNOs had become less visible in schools, and that was having an impact. And here is an example of what helps parent carers and school staff feel happy about the CNO support. So, for example, the CNO gave me specific advice on the school applications for the autism classes. If I hadn't spoken to her, I wouldn't have known. So it was the one-to-one interaction that helped me get that information. So key individual frontline staff can make this difference. Here's another example of a parent carer who got in touch with a CNO who was managing other CNOs in her region because she'd found it hard to start with to find someone. And this CNO had eventually supported in finding a placement for that child. A majority of parent carers were positive about how well the CNO supported them. But sometimes when they weren't positive, if they were among the 48% who weren't as positive, it was because of relational experiences. This is an example. Sino was rude and condescending, she was patronising and argumentative, and the meeting we had with her was one of the worst experiences of my life. It was obvious she was there to allocate as few resources as possible and had no interest in the best interests of my child. The Sinos I met a couple of weeks ago, NCSE Sinos I met and reported to, don't want this for parents. It's an example of how being gaslighted or judged can impact so much on perception. What was clear as well was that parent carers want to be kept in the loop. They want people to communicate with them, and they want to be at the centre, and they'd love it if the system was more collegiate and cooperative, and people in the system spoke to each other. There was generally low awareness of NCSE as an organisation, and school staff were relatively unfamiliar with NCSE services, their remits, how they operated, but their knowledge came directly from the people they met in the NCSE. And for a lot of school staff and parents, carers, they had this kind of what we call pillar-to-post experience in the system, which could leave them feeling quite isolated. And we also see this phenomenon of knowledge of the NCSE when we start looking at the policy and practice landscape. So interestingly, 47% of parents, carers who responded to our surveys had never heard of the NCSE. What they knew about the NCSE came from their interaction with that individual member of staff who worked within NCSE's frontline services. And parents, carers said to us that it would be good if the NCSE did some kind of advertising campaign to make it clearer to the wider public what their role was. We also saw in the data as a mediator of sentiment, frustration about energy-sapping bureaucracy. We've mentioned that before, and that really did impact on what people were telling us. Interestingly, a majority of school staff, 59%, said they did not find the NCSE very easy to work with. We've already explained the reasons we think our explanations for this are to do with bureaucracy, relational issues, and communication. And also, we found that in the survey, 61% of school staff were not satisfied with the support they'd had from the NCSE. And a lot of this was to do with insufficiency in resource and scarcity. So, we get to the point where we're going to summarise what's working well. This is an era for hope and growth and transformation. So these are the things that we have available to us to work from. The first is that across the participants, NCSE frontline services were highly valued and sometimes even prized by parent carers and school staff. The visiting teacher services, the NCSE advisory service, the Sino role, teacher professional learning, additional resources like technology that was provided for children, school transport, website resources, NCSE guides, and research, all of those were in various ways identified as being valuable. It's just that we didn't hear as many descriptions of impact from those services. And a majority of parents, carers, as you heard, did say that these services had resulted in positive benefits for their children. We also found that many of our participants had worked with brilliant staff in the NCSE who were committed and knowledgeable. Our experience of working with and talking to NCSE staff suggests the same. These are This is a group of staff who are open-minded and committed to change and ready for change, and students told us their own positive stories of belonging and inclusion and participation in schools. And this was happening even where those parent carers might have experienced difficulties. These positive outcomes were coming about even where there might have been dilemmas to manage. So what needs to be developed according to participants? So firstly, is that insufficiencies need to be resolved so that the services can be more responsive. The second is an important one. Our participants were telling us that they really need to work with people who have the time and the interest in building positive relationships that are personalised, non-judgmental and mutually respectful. Quality of relationships really mattered when participants were sharing perceptions of the services. Participants were telling us that they would like the NCSE to prioritise responsive and timely communication so they don't get lost in a loop. And they also asked for processes to be streamlined. The other thing that we would ask for everyone to think about is that in the discourse, mostly it was about process. We think a shift in discourse in the direction of impact is needed because the whole system as a collegiate, collaborating entity, when focused on outcomes together, may be a way to take Ireland even further forward in constructing an inclusive education system that's world-class. And we also think this is something to do with a continuum of responsibility, where responsibility for inclusive outcomes passes from hand to hand and is held in parallel, and where the line of sight is on what is happening for students in school. I'm going to use a very strong verb now. I'm going to use the word yearning. We could hear in our participants' accounts a yearning for more trust and collegiality, for a more collaborative systems, and parent carers want people to work together and they want to be kept informed. And our participants also told us that public relations were going to be an important part of moving this story forward. And we just want to share this final reflection with you. So, NCSE frontline services are highly valued. They're considered to be the right services in this system. But from the perspective of service users, there are resource insufficiencies, process obstacles, communication issues and relational needs that need priority attention. And yes, this does mean continuing cultural transformation for the NCSE, its frontline services, all in the context of Vision 26. And it does mean attention to relational work in each and every interaction with parent carers and school staff across services and operational excellence. But it also means building a culture where collective responsibility for pursuing and knowing inclusive impacts are part of the embedded discourse along a continuum from hand to hand and in parallel. So the full research report is nearly finished and will shortly be published, and you'll find a more nuanced and detailed account of our findings there. And Lisa mentioned a paper that we've published about the approach we used in case studies. So thank you for listening.